Stranger Stories.
Never miss another strange story. Subscribe and hit the bell. Sit back and get comfortable. I have a few stories to share with you. Welcome and good night. The Chernobyl disaster was a catastrophic nuclear accident that occurred on April 1986. The accident occurred during a late-night safety test, which simulated a station blackout power failure. Ironically, and sadly enough, this ended up being much more than just a safety test. And with that, let's get to the stories. One of the most fascinating events in history, by far, was the Chernobyl disaster. The nuclear power plant that exploded, killing 31 immediately and thousands after the effects of the radiations took their toll. The place itself is located in the city of Pripyat in Chernobyl in the Ukraine. The Pripyat River and a large body of water that was used as a cooling reservoir for the power plant run adjacent to these two cities. After 30 years, wildlife is thriving in these now overgrown ghost towns, even better than before the incident occurred. Some residents have returned to the city of Chernobyl to resume their lives, but Pripyat is still completely abandoned. I wanted to know why. I'm a bit of a disaster enthusiast. As morbid as that sounds, one of my favorite hobbies is visiting sites such as Hiroshima, Nagasaki, 3 Mile Island, Bhopal. I've toured as close as I can to Fukushima, and I've seen the Darvaza gas crater or the Gates of Hell with my own eyes. I've even gone as far as Auschwitz in Poland. There's just something humbling about seeing a man-made disaster in person, seeing how destructive and uncontrollable the human race truly is. There was only one place left on my bucket list. I wanted to see where one of, if not the worst, nuclear disasters happened. An explosion so catastrophic that it leaked 100 times the amount of radiation into the air than that of Hiroshima or Nagasaki. I bought my airline tickets and packed my backpack. There was a small layover in France before the flight took us to the Ukraine capital, Kiev. I got a hotel room and got some much-needed sleep for the adventure ahead. I was able to get a local taxi service to take me right outside the city of Chernobyl the next day. It was about 10 kilometers or 6 miles walk to the reactor and the city of Pripyat. I retrieved my backpack from the trunk and began my trek. I was relatively early in the morning. As long as I kept a steady pace, I could be there by midday. Easier said than done, with the enormous backpack slowing me down. What should have been a 2, maybe 3-hour hike escalated into a 5-hour haul. I must have passed the nuclear plant, as I was first met by these large, white apartment-like buildings. Pripyat was home to over 40,000 workers and their families before the nuclear blast forced an emergency evacuations of all citizens. In a matter of a few days, it was abandoned, never to see another resident. I ventured into the city, taking in the silence and perilous views. It was pure bliss. I passed the infamous Ferris wheel and the remnants of a once lively carnival. Tall buildings paint the perimeter of the city, and vehicles lay untouched throughout the streets. Everything has been overtaken by plant life. Nature has truly thrived once human left this area. Deer, bison, wolves, cows and birds appear in abundance. Even though these animals are doing well, they are still affected by the radiation, and it's best to steer clear of them. I can't stay long. I want to make it to the reactor by nightfall. I make my way to the river that will guide me south to the power plant. As the sun sets and my legs grow tired, a giant concrete dome pierces the horizon. I read that a 500-feet structure was built in the late 2007 to help contain the radioactive waste for the next century or so. This must be it. I made it. I found a small clearing a good distance away from the reactor to set up camp. My life revolved around these activities, but I was not stupid. In case the local police or military patrolled the area, I wanted to stay fairly hidden. I know I could get in a lot of trouble for trespassing in such a dangerous area. After the tent was set up, I crawled inside and was immediately greeted by sleep. I was awoken by the quiet tap of rain on the tent. I rolled over and closed my eyes to return to sleep, but was met with another sound that made my blood run ice cold. It sounded like someone or something was in distress, something very large. The cry echoed like thunder. It was very guttural and sounded almost like a whale call. The vibrations of the hum shook the tent. Adrenaline coursed through my veins. I unzipped the tent just enough to get an eye through, but was met only by darkness and cold rain. I continued to unzip the door in order to get a better look. Whatever it was, a small plastic tent was not going to provide much protection. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The hum cries out again. Birds frantically flee their nests. Then, like a wrecking ball to the building, an abrupt crash follows, shaking the earth. Construction? In the middle of the night? I pondered out loud. A crack of lightning lights up the entire sky. What I saw that night cannot physically be possible. I've gone through multiple scenarios in my head, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Something I could only describe as a creature stood over the cement building that covered the nuclear plant. It was in the shape of a human, but just the decayed skeleton of one. The building was 500 feet tall. This thing lingered over it, slamming its closed, rotted fists into it. Its jaw slowly cracked open as another booming hum rattles the trees. My attention is diverted to something steering in the cooling reservoir. The sounds of a submarine breaching water. I wait for another flash of lightning so I could see through the thick black of night. I am splashed by water as an arm, stories tall, reaches into the sky and slams on the ground outside the reservoir. Another creature emerges from the water's depth. This one screaming an ear-piercing howl, much different than the other one. I rip my gaze away from the beasts, grab my flashlight, and run to the protection of the tree line. When I penetrate the forest, I'm tackled to the ground as a Russian man in military outfits screams at me. It's pouring rain at this point. I try to explain that I cannot understand what they're saying, but before I can even move my mouth, the cold butt of a rifle struck my face and I lose consciousness. When I came back around, I was on an airplane. I rubbed my forehead where the rifle struck when nothing was there, just the faint remnants of a headache. The plane landed in France, and as my backpack came down the conveyor belt, I noticed nothing was amiss. My tent, flashlight, and sleeping bag were all in their respective places. Radiation sickness would take much longer than a day to make me sick. Whatever I saw that night was real. I don't know if it's the military weapon testing or the military protecting whatever is in that reactor, but I know why the citizens of Pripyat never returned home. This, to some, may sound insane. It may sound like I've gone mad, or that I'm simply making all of this up. You make what you want of it, but this was my story. I'm on a radiation monitoring team for Russia. Now, I know where all your minds are instantly going to, and you are probably right. Chernobyl. It is a very high-paying job, but I only actually do work once or twice a month. I'm sent to check animals, plants, and radiation levels. I was just diagnosed with thyroid cancer and given 2 months to live. I need to get this off my chest. So I will tell you about my first job in the company, and maybe it will help shed some light on what really is going on over there. It was my first day. We had loaded up a huge double-bladed helicopter. I was to go and take radiation levels and samples of plants, or so I was told. We got everything ready and off we went. On the flight, they made me and 5 other people slip on heavy rubber suits with gas masks and lights. These were to protect against radiation and provide visibility. 2 of the people in the group held rifles. They were experts, and us 4 were new on the job. After an hour of flying, we finally touched down. My gauger counter went off like crazy instantly. The other 5 told me to shut it up, so I did. We started walking towards the reactor. When we saw it in the distance, we stopped. The 2 men with the assault rifles then turned around, faced us, and started telling us about it. No one knows how it happened, but the area of Chernobyl is not under quarantine for just radiation, they explained. The meltdown was not caused by the safety locks being turned off. In fact, this is word for word what they said. A small meteorite had hit the building, shearing into the reactor. It had contained some kind of an alien life form, and the radiation had mutated it. I know this sounds like something from a movie, and that's exactly what went through my mind standing there and listening to this nonsense. However, just as they finished explaining, a horrible, loud shriek rose from the overgrown forest. The men looked scared through their visors and started sprinting. The rest of us followed. Only I made it back. And that is the only reason you are able to hear this story. The first man was cut down by something that moved too fast to see. His legs were gone, cut by a razor-thin edge. The other gun-toting man told us to leave him. We kept running, and I looked back. I still wish I didn't. A grey humanoid figure stood over his corpse. Its skin was stretched tight over its bony frame. Its overly long arms and legs were grotesque. It squatted over the men. I screamed, and it turned straight to me. Its face was horrible. It looked human, but impossibly thin. Razor-sharp fangs stretched in a chilling grin. This thing had no nose on its face, just 2 slits. Then it ran. To this day, I wonder how I'm still alive. It was going at least 60 miles an hour. When it swung something so sharp, it cut right through my radiation suit, letting the toxic air pour in. I held my breath. This thing kept running, cutting and slashing through 2 more people. I was slowly beginning to lose consciousness from holding my breath for so long. I tried covering with my hand the torn radiation suit, but to no avail. The final gunman had a similar fate to the others, being cut down and tumbled to the ground. I then noticed one of the other new people, Allison, standing up, shaking. This thing grinned again, and the last thing I remember before passing out were Allison's screams as she was picked up by the creature, only to never be seen again. I woke up in the hospital, seemingly with no injuries or no serious threat to my life. As soon as I got back, the company decided to send me on more and more operations, seeing how I survived whatever happened there. The goal was to study this thing, but every mission I came back alone. I do not know why I was the only survivor, or why whatever this thing was chose to spare me over and over again. With a handsome compensation for every mission successful, I didn't care. But now, with about 2 months to live, I need to get this off my chest. Chernobyl will never be safe.